50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
On 29th of September 1957, the people of Chelyabinsk in Russia were witness to strange lights appearing in the sky, changing colors from blue to violet. The local press reported the event as a weird case of northern lights, but the truth was much more sinister, because those were the first signs of the large-scale nuclear accident that ever happened in history. The crisis was overthrown only by Fukushima and Chernobyl when it comes to explosions of nuclear reactors. I'm sure that most of you never heard of this incident, and that's right, because Russian government hid it better than me when I tried to hide my sources of income from IRS. Anyway, this is gonna be a hell of a story. We're gonna talk about explosions, mutations, how Russian government tries to hide it, and how they operate when something like this happens. So sit down, make some tea, milk or without, I don't care. But make sure you watch this video till the end, because if you don't, I will scratch your dad's favorite car with keys and then blame it all on you. This is Mayak, the nuclear plant we're gonna be talking about. It was near a Russian town called Kyshtym, which is located on the eastern side of southern Ural Mountains. What I found interesting is that during the Cold War, CIA was watching Kyshtym very closely for decades. While its purpose wasn't clear at the beginning, it later came out that this whole area was a birthplace for a nuclear Soviet program. The work on the site was going on from 1945 to 1948, and as usual for our beloved USSR, they used forced labor. They got around 70k prisoners from 12 different labor camps, or how we like to call them, gulags. Now if you thought of 1v1s in COD, you're actually fucking stupid. Gulags were camps where criminals or any Western culture enjoyers were locked up for life and forced to work, not poggers. In 1948, work was finished and our little minions were sent back to Gulag to enjoy their staying. Question arises when talking about Kyshtym citizens. Russian government couldn't afford to have an information leaked like some OnlyFans star for all Twitter to see, so they had to make sure that nobody knows. But how did they do it? Nobody knows. See what I did there? Anyway, I guess they relocated citizens and the area was close to authorized only, but that's unclear. After the old population of Kyshtym was dealt with, a new wave of the settlers came to the city, described by CIA as communists and their dependents who came to Kyshtym from all over USSR. They were reportedly never able to leave the area again. You can only assume that settlers were loyal to the regime, so they signed some document that said if they leak the info to Russian Facebook, they will be punished.
It's now illegal
to talk about Kyshtym.
The region when all this was happening was around 2,700 square kilometers. Here you can find 8 lakes connected by waterways. Workers drained one of the lakes and built the structure there. After that, the lake was refilled with water again. From what I've gathered, basically water and lead were supposed to be tuning radiation down and acted like isolation. This whole structure was supposed to be processing nuclear waste designed by the whole country as stated in USSR government reports. But here is where CIA steps in and says,
"What are you doing?"
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Basically, CIA did some digging, some research, and they collected a super duper critical info that USSR are dirty liars. Oh no, who would have thought? It was reported that Kyshtym was manufacturing components for atomic weapons. Now, the numbers aren't exact, but after the construction was over, they put in around 41,000 workers, forced laborers of course. To keep those guys in line, you have to have 1 guard per 10 inmates, and there are at least 3 per day, and that adds up to 12k guards. CIA reports that area around Kyshtym had no fences or nothing, so they balanced it by even more guards, who basically kept track of things. If you take that and add some other fragments like logistics and signal units, the number adds up to be around 15,000. Now, I don't know how many trained soldiers waste disposal facility really needs, but 15k is a little bit of an overkill, don't you think? When Mayak got first achievement for creating a first nuclear bomb, government was like, I mean, cool, but can we get more of these? That led to lack of safety measures. You can think of it like a rush hour in that Fallout shelter game. But all that resulted in 70,245 workers being overdosed on radiation just between 1948 and 1958. And to top it off, because we are in USSR and here we like to take things to the extreme, between 1949 and 1952, after a lot of dumping radioactive waste into nearby rivers for bonus talent points, aka we don't give a shit about lives of Russian citizens. And keep in mind that those rivers went to villages where people used to drink and wash themselves in that water. And as you can imagine, that led to a lot of sick, poor people being even sicker. Now, numbers are not clear because doctors wrote it down in documents as cancer as such to keep it a secret. I mean, what else do you expect? Russia back then was hiding anything that was possible just to make themselves look better than the US. Piotr, what is that? Nothing, babushka Lyudmilovna. Ёбаный рот, блядь, what the fuck are you eating? This is gonna turn you into a dirty capitalistic pig. Oh, babushka, kvass again? I drank like 5 gallons yesterday. Shut the hell up, Piotr, and come help me put this carpet on the wall. USSR then realized that they probably did an oopsie, so instead of dumping toxic waste to rivers, they dumped it to lakes.
Good job!
This video feels like an Assassin's Creed intro where they show the logo around 2 hours of gameplay to the game, because only now we get to talk about Day D, the big boom boom. September 29th, 1957. Right, so basically cooling thing in the plant failed and it somehow ignited dry nitrate and escalated salts. That's how Russian people celebrated 4th of July in September. A lot of not-so-poggers nuclear toxic products from the explosion got into air and contaminated an area over 300 kilometers long and 66 kilometers wide. Just for the comparison, that's how fat your mom is. Radioactivity level was estimated to around 20 million Cyrus. Just for reference, 20 mil Cyrus equals to 700 petabecquerels. For you plebeian peasants or people who decided to choose art as their major, that's 700 followed by 16 zero. The human body can take only 8k becquerels, so yeah, that's not very healthy. Anyway, in 1994, Akleev and Lubchansky came up with the conclusion that 1,054 inhabitants living in that area were hit with radiation dose of 517 millisieverts. But a human body is only allowed to be exposed to radiation levels of 2 or 3 millisieverts every year. These guys received 200 times that. If that was already not enough trouble, 2.7% of toxic material consisted of strontium-90. Even though 2.7 isn't really a lot, it cost decades of this whole area making radioactive wasteland affecting small creatures, water, and finally humans. As you can imagine, Russian government had to take some action. Once again, they took people from that area and basically threw them on the street. They told them to kill all the stocks and leave all the stuff behind, and bye-bye. Depending on sources, 20 to 32 villages were evacuated. Former premier of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, wanted to keep this all a secret, so he wouldn't be memed on 4chan by Norwegian trolls. I guess it's not the best PR to have this disaster right in the middle of nuclear Soviet program. So this info was deleted from the search history of your browser just like any oopsie that happened in Russia. A report from CIA by number CS3 389-785 told the story of how all the food in Kyshtym was locked off because of the potential radiation exposure, and new food was transported on trains and trucks to Kyshtym and handed out to people in long queues. It wouldn't be a Russian disaster without a little starvation event. Civilians of Kyshtym have started to fall into a mysterious unknown disease. Oh, what could it be, I wonder? Yeah, it was radiation sickness. Oh no! But as expected, doctors said it's cancer.
Well, after 14 hours of testing, I can say Butters is definitely suffering from aggravated repressed memory syndrome.
Some symptoms were heavy cough, fever, and skin that was literally falling off. Approximately 200 inhabitants died of this mysterious cancer. But that's not the only struggles that people of Kyshtym had to face. Fear and anger was surely a big motivator in this situation. Vandalism, stealing, and whatnot became a daily bread for Kyshtym population. Keep in mind that they couldn't grow anything nor hunt anything, since radiation killed all these sources of food. Shortly after the disaster, USSR started a cleanup operation, in order to act like nothing happened. In old-fashioned USSR style, they promised prisoners of Gulag shorter sentences or even pardons in exchange for work in Kyshtym. However, nobody expected them to come back. These cleaners were usually called Death Brigade. A year after the incident, landscape hasn't changed much. People were still avoiding the area, and food produced locally was taken for inspection. Whoever traveled to or from Kyshtym had to be checked for any potential risks, and were allowed only if they had special permit. And additionally, any local villages were burnt to the ground just in case. So now when we think about it, if CIA knew about all this and had more than enough to make fun of Russia and show everyone how incapable they are, which would surely boost their in-game elo at least a couple of ranks up, since they were in damn Cold War, and that would be a huge PR. They didn't do anything, and the reason is very simple. US wanted to avoid general public questioning their own safety, since they had their own nuclear site in Washington state. So that's about it, and now back to USSR. General public got more details on the situation only in 1976, when Soviet biologist Zhoris Medvedev spoke about how medical situation was handled after disaster. Apparently, the Soviet government took a serious approach to healing affected citizens. The Deputy Minister of Health of the USSR, Professor A.I. Burznian, set up a medical team nearby Chelyabinsk. He was helped by G.D. Basinilo, who was an expert in radiology and radiation sickness. He was able to write down 11 possible cases of radiation sickness, but it was never published. 150 studies were written about local impact on nature and gens, never published. Medvedev was strongly against it since he wanted to keep it all in secret. In 1971, Soviet Union went crazy with power plants and started building them massively. Basinilov criticized government for building Mayak so close to the villages and settlements. Yet I guess his social credit wasn't high enough, since most of these plants were built right next to towns and such. And we can say that Basinilov was right about this, because now we can play one of the greatest COD campaign missions. So you know what they say, every coin has two sides. As you probably guess, people who were exposed to radiation were most likely to get leukemia, cancer, or some other not-so-poggers things. What I found interesting though are mutations. Local fishermen claimed to catch fish with 3 eyes, or no eyes at all. Interesting. But what's even more interesting is a case of Kyshtym dwarf. In 1996, a woman called Tamara Prosvirina was spotted walking around town with a weird-looking baby. She called him Alexei or Alushenka. Several people met this Alushenka, describing him as 25cm tall humanoid with brown skin with no hair and large eyes. Nobody knew where this young fella came from. Tamara turned out to be tier 3 schizo and ended up in hospital. Therefore, Alushenka was left alone and nobody took care of him. And as you guessed it, he's dead. The body was found by Tamara's friend, who mummified. This friend was later arrested and the body was collected by Vladimir Bendlin. He was the first one to question origin of Alushenka. The experts believe that Alushenka was a baby who was born with huge deformations, probably because of radiation. Vladimir kept the little fella in the fridge until he handed over to a group of ufologists, who at some point just disappeared, and so did the tale of Alushenka, the Kyshtym dwarf. Recently in 2019, studies came out that back in 2017 a level of tritium-19 were more than normal across the Europe, and all fingers pointed to Kyshtym incident. These levels were still harmless, so that's why you probably didn't hear about it, yet it's a little concerning. I guess you can take two morals from the story. First, nuclear energy is a good servant but a horrible chief. Second, we should always learn from our mistakes and prepare for the worst.